I want to welcome everyone to our All About Alumni presentation. I'm just delighted that you've tuned in to listen to our first presenter for today is Tami Chu, graduate of our Masters of Science in Holistic Nutrition program. And I just want to let you know, if you're listening for the first time, that All About Alumni is a platform that showcases Hawthorne's graduates in order for them to share their post-grad activities and accomplishments. They've done so many amazing things, and the way they're using their education and their practices is really nothing short of amazing. We have a variety of nationally accredited degree and certificate programs at Hawthorne. Some of them are for students that are pursuing a clinical track with the goal of working directly with clients, and other programs are dedicated to those that are seeking to primarily educate. And certainly we have programs for people who simply want to learn valuable, credible information in a conducive environment. The success of our students is certainly the testament of Hawthorne's mission and principle to provide quality, affordable, holistic health and nutrition education, because we love learning more at Hawthorne. And we've had so many previous graduate presentations, and we've recorded those. We're recording this one today too, so I hope that you'll explore the archived webinars on our website and view their presentations too. I'm your host, Paula Bartholomew. I'm one of the founders of Hawthorne, and it's such a privilege for me to be able to speak with and feature our graduates. So let me get us started. Every life takes unexpected turns, but it's how we navigate those turns that is part of our journey. Today we feature Tami Chu. She's a graduate of our unique MSHN clinical training program, and Tammy's going to tell the story of how she went from first grade teacher to nutritionist to publisher of a nationally acclaimed magazine because of many unexpected turns. We'll hear about Tammy's experience as she shares her professional developments after graduating from Hawthorne University with her master's degree and all the twists and turns she's traversed to get to where she is today. In her presentation, The Uncommon Path, Finding Purpose in Life and Business, Tami discusses why and how she got into her particular niche, as well as the challenges and successes she's experienced along the way. And while I have the pleasure of interviewing Tami, you will have the opportunity to ask her questions directly too. So all you need to do is post a question or a comment to the question panel. And a reminder that we're recording, and we'll have this posted to our website. You'll be able to find it on archived webinars in just a few days. So I want to welcome you, Tami.
Hi.
Hi. I'm really excited to be here together. I hope you are too.
I am. Thank you for having me, Paula.
Absolutely. I want to introduce you now, and I'm going to start with your bio before you start sharing your postgrad experiences.
All right.
All right. Tami graduated from Hawthorne in January of 2016, and before she pursued her master's degree in holistic nutrition at Hawthorne, she was a special education teacher with a master's degree in deaf education. She left teaching to raise and homeschool her 4 children, who, along with a flock of backyard chickens, certainly kept her busy. She spent a few years as a chapter leader for the Weston A. Price Foundation, promoting healthy living in her community. And at the same time, she ran a local food buyers club to encourage discounted purchases of organic products. And she taught nutrition classes in a at her local community. Her journey into real food and holistic wellness began in childhood with homemade everything and a focus on natural products, thanks to her mother. And the path was solidified when her 4th child, was a twin, was born with multiple allergies that had him covered in rashes from 3 weeks old. When doctors couldn't provide answers, Tami went searching on her own and hasn't stopped since. Recently, Tami and her husband acquired ownership of the flagship edible magazine, Edible Ojai in Ventura County, and now as publisher and editor, she uses her education to inform story choices and to pick recipes to share through her publication. So we're really pleased you've joined here Tami's Journey. Tami, are you ready to share it?
I sure am.
All right, let's get started, and it's always a good place to start at the beginning. So why don't we have you tell us a little bit about your background and what led you to study nutrition?
All right. Well, I am definitely, I say to people that I've had 4 lifetimes in one life so far. And so it started really kind of humble. I grew up in a little area in Tulsa, Oklahoma, kind of outside the main city. And you can see in in these images, this is actually down the street from where I grew up, the road. And so it's just kind of out in the country, and we had 2 acres, and I had kind of the freedom to roam anywhere we wanted to. You know, this was quite a while ago, and we had a lot more freedom back in those days. We had chickens that my parents kept for eggs and for meat, and then we had this huge, huge vegetable garden, which probably wasn't as big as I remember it, but to me at that age, it was just massive. And I have 5 brothers and sisters, and we all had to work in the vegetable garden. So I had my own patch of strawberries, and then we had to do, you know, weeding and working and things like that. So I kind of grew up with an understanding of nature and being involved in it, and, you know, kind of just, I was, you know, running barefoot. My dad built us a tree house that we slept in all the time, and we had the roam of the neighborhood, played in the local pond. I mean, it was just kind of a wild childhood. And of course, that's what I recommend for everyone now, if you can find it. But so I kind of feel very blessed to have grown up with that. Because we kind of grew up in that environment, I've always had the track of just kind of good eating and good health. And so my first career path, we moved to California when I was 13, and I didn't have quite as wild a childhood after California, but was then able to graduate high school and pick my own university to go to. And so my parents, once we moved to California, were both teachers. And I always say never now, because when I was younger, I said, I will never be a teacher. Whatever I do, that's the one thing I won't do, is I won't be a teacher. And of course, what did I do? I became a teacher. So that was my first career path. My first path in life was being a teacher. And I taught first grade initially, and then I went on to get my master's degree in deaf education. And so I taught deaf and hard of hearing children in middle school after that. And one of the best things about my childhood and growing up in this kind of really wonderful environment was that we had the freedom to choose our own path. And, you know, my parents, I remember it as my dad, but I'm sure that my mom was a big part of it too, always kind of told us that we could do anything that we wanted to do, right? It's, as long as we are working towards something, and, you know, as long as we get, my dad always said, as long as you get educated, then you can go be a stay-at-home mom. It's fine, just get an education. And so that's what I did. I actually got educated, and actually it was my experience in the classroom that made me choose to become a stay-at-home mom, because I could see the difference between the children who had moms who were able to be very present with their children as stay-at-home moms, and moms who, you know, had to work a little bit more. And, you know, I could just see the difference in the kids. And so it was a choice that I made for myself and for my children, that when I did have children, I decided to stay home. And so actually before that, we'll just run before that, when I was getting my master's degree, I was working full-time in the classroom, and I was getting my master's degree in deaf education, and I was planning my wedding. So it was a little bit of a lot of things going on at the same time. And I remember 2 weeks before our wedding, my husband now actually said to me, please tell me it's not always going to be like this. And of course, I told him then that no, of course not. There's so much going on. You know, I'm doing all these things. Little did I know that that was actually probably setting the stage for the rest of my life. I like to do lots of things. I like to have lots of things going on. So, so that was my, you know, unfortunately for my husband, that's kind of the way things have gone ever since. So my second life path was taking that time and raising my children. So, you know, that's a whole career of its own too. I mean, they'd say that what a stay-at-home mom does is valued at about $300,000 a year. So there's definitely a place for that as well. So we ended up having 4 children, and this of course was about 8 years ago. So they're all teenagers now. I have an almost 18-year-old, an almost 16-year-old, and then 13-year-old twins. And so that was a lovely second path for me. We homeschooled, so these chickens that they're holding in these pictures was our first batch of chickens. So we had chickens for almost 9 years. And then we went on to the natural progression. And like I said, I like to do lots of things. So while I was homeschooling my children and making sure that my house was taken care of, I decided to get involved in the Weston A. Price Foundation because we were interested in real food. I found that when we ate organic, it was better for me, better for my kids. So to be able to afford that, since we were working on one, my husband was working and I wasn't, I started a natural food co-op so that we could afford the better food, the raw milk, the raw cheeses from local farms, the CSA boxes, things like that. So that so that's kind of how I made that work. And then as part of our education program with the homeschooling, we went to just about every single farm that I could find in the neighborhood, in the area, within about 100 miles. And so that was part of our journey as homeschoolers. And then my son was born with multiple allergies, and it didn't make sense. The main reason it didn't make sense was because he was a twin. They shared the same environment. They were born naturally. They were full term. They were actually a day late. So I was 40 weeks plus a day when they were born. They both breastfed exclusively. And you can't see as much in this picture, but he had eczema under his arms, in the crease of his elbow, behind his knees, and all over his face, and all over his scalp, and often on his feet too. And the doctors couldn't figure it out, because doctors, when they see eczema, there's not necessarily the connection that it's allergies. And that's something that I've seen over and over and over again, is when a child has eczema, there's often a reaction that they're having to some sort of food or environmental toxin or something. So the allergies were kind of the final piece of the puzzle for me, because when you're a mom and you don't have answers for what's happening to your child, moms are probably one of the strongest researchers that we actually have, because they have a great motivation to figure out what's going on. And so that's what I did. I went searching for answers. I learned a lot about allergies. I learned a lot about food allergies, which of course, before he was born, I had no idea, really just no idea at all. And so I kind of just kept going and kept going and kept going until I came to an end of what I could research.
Well, the big curiosity here is that as a twin, that it didn't happen to both of them. They both didn't have allergies and eczema. Right. So really curious.
Right. Yeah, and my daughter, actually, we did find out later that she has a wheat allergy, but it's not something that shows up on her skin.
I see.
So she does have something also. So there was potentially some, womb environment or, background that could have resulted in some of their allergies, but, it didn't show up the same way. So we didn't find out about hers for a long time.
Well, the continuation of that is that partially of what helped you make a decision to go back to school?
Yeah, actually, as a matter of fact, it's exactly what made me decide to go back to school. because, and of course, my first degree was in education, so it was not a science background at all. And I always said, you know, like I said, never say never, right? But I always said that I was not a scientist. I wasn't a math person. That wasn't my strength. I was always kind of the liberal arts and the English person. And, but studying allergies and studying what's going on with my son and trying all these different things, because we were able to, by the time he was 2, we were able to really control his diet and almost clear him completely of allergies. People were shocked when they saw him, if they hadn't seen him for a while, because his skin was so clear.
Yeah,
and it was really just because I was able to, because I knew it was allergies, and I was able to test every single food as we were introducing it to him. So it was very fortunate to learn it so early. But I got to a place where I was like, I don't know what else to research. I don't know what else to, where else to look to find this information. And so I started looking into programs where I could learn more, I could have access to more research, I could have access to more information.
So someone that led you to Hawthorne?
It was, actually. And deciding on Hawthorne in particular was, you know, I just started looking for all the schools that were any kind of like alternative related, because the schools that like UC Davis or things like that, they weren't teaching the information that I wanted to know. So when I started looking, I found Hawthorne because they were Weston Price related. And at that time, it was really important to me because I was a co-chapter leader of Weston Price, because that was something that was so important to me. And nutrition really became kind of this passion project for me. And so just being able to know more about nutrition. And then, so when I saw that Hawthorne had classes that taught nutrition specifically with anatomy, that was, I think that was one of the things that was a big, that was a big key for me, because I wanted to understand anatomy, but I wanted to understand how nutrition related to anatomy as well, to our digestion and to all of the different things that happen in our bodies, because I knew they were connected, but I didn't know exactly how. And then Hawthorne also had the degree programs available, whereas a lot of the programs that I was looking at were just, you know, 9-month program or a year-long program. And so it was just a certification. And, you know, growing up in a family where education was really important, the degree component added kind of that authority. Sure. To, you know, when you're talking about nutrition, because especially at that time, everything that I learned, the people around me, especially my family, questioned me about everything, because it was not mainstream information at that time, 10 years ago. It was not information that, you know, we have so much of that information now, and back then it was not information that was readily available. And so when I would come and talk about how nutrition affects the body, people would be like, okay, whatever. Sure, you know. So I got a lot of like pushback, and so the degree actually offered that step where it's like that I have a little bit of authority if I'm getting a degree in this, you know, in nutrition. And then the final piece to that puzzle was the flexibility of the online program, because being a stay-at-home mom, doing, you know, the work that I'm doing at home, I needed to be able to do school at night or do school, you know, when they were taking their naps or anything like that.
And there probably wasn't a program even on ground, on site, that offered the same kind of educational and clinical training that you were seeking too.
Yeah, not at all. It just wasn't out there. Hawthorne was kind of an easy choice.
Well, we're glad you found us and entered Hawthorne's doors. So I think this would be a good time for you to talk a little bit about what your experiences were like with us.
Absolutely. I loved the flexibility of the schedule. That was very, very helpful for me. I'm a little bit of an overachiever. So school for me as an adult was very different than it was when I got my first master's degree. When I got my first master's degree, I was in my early 20s. I didn't have children. I was just getting married, so it wasn't the same. So it was definitely a different experience as an adult, because now I care so much more about my grade, and that it's not just about my grade, but it's also about what I'm learning. And if there were a couple moments in the first couple of classes where Professor Marcy Smith was my first professor, and I said to her after, I think I don't remember the name of the class, but it was the digestion class where you're learning about the digestive anatomy.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to the end of the class and I was like, okay, I got an A, and I got a really good A, and I did really well on all my papers, but I felt like I didn't quite get it. I didn't have a deep understanding of how digestion worked. I didn't know all the names of all the
Mm-hmm.
organs and the parts. And I'm like, I know that I can do this open book, but I can't really have a conversation about it that made me feel like I really understood it. And she said, and this was, to me, this carried on throughout the rest of my education and in my careers. She said, don't worry about it. She says, everything builds on itself.
Mm-hmm.
So you're getting the base right now. And once you get this, the next thing is going to build, well, she said the next class, but for me in life, the next thing builds on top of that. And then the next thing builds on top of that. And there are going to be moments where it just all clicks into place and you get it.
Right. And, it was an introductory course in physiology, anatomy, focusing on digestion. And so luckily, when you got into your upper level courses, you returned to the GI track in much greater depth, right?
Yes, absolutely. And we got more information about the physiology and anatomy and how nutrition affects each thing. So yes, it gets much deeper as you go along. So if you don't get it in the first couple classes, it's okay. It's coming. It's going to come, and you will get it. And now I can talk about it and, have great conversations about all the different pieces and parts and, motility and all the fun things.
I think one of the beauties of the way the curriculum is organized in the upper level courses of this program is that you are introduced to one body system at a time. So you're covering GI and then endocrine and then immune and then neurological, so that you're learning the physiology and anatomy of that body system and the common pathology that's associated with it and the holistic ways to address it. So set you up pretty well, I think, going through it like that.
Yeah, and it's very helpful, I think, just because you're able to just focus on one thing at a time. I think that, the more that you get, the more you can actually see how the whole works together as well. Mm-hmm. So that's a beautiful thing.
Okay.
So, and I also love the research papers that I mean, it's so weird to say that now, right? Like, I love the research papers that you have to do for classes, but I really did, because it gave me the opportunity because you have kind of a, within that class, you have a little bit of freedom to pick topics that are, that are close to you. And so I was able to, my dad had polio when he was a child. And so one of the research papers I did was post-polio syndrome. My mother-in-law had Parkinson's disease. And so one of the research papers that I did was on Parkinson's disease. And so you're really able to kind of take the things that are in your own life and, research them and expand on them. And again, I'm a little bit of an overachiever. So I had stacks and stacks of books from the library on each of these topics when I did my research paper. And it was always trying to edit it down to the word limit, which is always my issue, is editing it down. So I always had my papers too long, and I always had to cut out a ton of stuff before I turned them in.
Before you had to turn it in, but you had discovered it for yourself, and you had all that notation for you to refer to at any time going forward.
Yeah, exactly. So it was really, I actually really appreciated, and I appreciate the word limits, because I think you can end up with way too much information. And with the word limits, you really have to get down to the nitty gritty, and you have to get down to the core of what you're talking about.
Absolutely.
So so I loved that. It was really helpful. Professor Smith, Professor Marcy, she actually had a baby while I was taking her classes, and so she took maternity leave, and so then I was able to get Dr. Bianca Garilli, who has been fantastic. Even after my experience at Hawthorne, I've been able to talk to her about things that have been going on and kind of following her journey as well as a naturopathic doctor. So just the experience with the professors has been really fantastic as well.
Terrific. So it looks like it took you a little longer than you anticipated to finish because of your rabbit holes. Is that right?
It did. And, you know, throughout the process, with kids, there's all kinds of things. I mean, these pictures are just kind of representative of how I did schoolwork. Sometimes it was, you know, at my table with the kids doing schoolwork around me. Sometimes I was sitting in the car waiting for them to get out of dance class. Sometimes I took everything to a coffee shop and worked there. But yeah, it did take me a little bit longer to finish, but that was part of what I loved about the flexibility, because you have a little bit of time between classes where if you need to get things done at home, or if you have other things going on, you know, other jobs or other things, then you have time to kind of work on that and then get ready to take the next class.
I'm glad to see your that you demonstrated that you were on the president's list consistently as you went through school. This is really a testament to your commitment and your dedication to learning, and how extensively you took that while you were in school. So bravo for that again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I think that all this researching has me thinking about your thesis, and I know that it was really near and dear to your heart. So I'd like you to tell us what you chose to research and why.
Yeah, I I actually, again, like I said, how when you pick the things that you are researching, you get to pick things that are relevant in your life. And physically, school was not super good for me, which is interesting because there were so many benefits to it. But because of how much else I had going on in my life, there was kind of a higher level of stress. My food intake was not good because I was so concerned about feeding my children that I often kind of left, you know, that whole self-care thing is not really good when you've got too much going on. So my food intake was not as good. I ate a lot less, which is the irony of, you know, weight gain, is that a lot of times when you eat less, you end up gaining weight because your body goes into that starvation kind of capture every single calorie mode. And then I didn't have as much time because of what I was doing to do the exercise and to move as much as I needed to, because it really just became about the kids and getting my work done. So even though my diet was super clean, I actually ended up gaining quite a bit of weight in the 4 years that I was in school. And so by the time I was starting to decide what to pick for my thesis, the information about bacteria, about the gut bacteria, was just starting to kind of come out. And I had the bonus of having a sister who is a microbiologist. And so she had studied biology. And of course, we get little bits of that. And so I started looking into obesity in the gut microbiome because of the weight that I had gained and the information that was just starting to come out about the gut microbiome. I was able to kind of create a thesis topic called obesity in the gut microbiome. And we did a webinar on it afterwards. So I know that's in the archives and on the channel. And so basically one of the things that I did was I created an ancestral diet, and then I became the N1 experiment of seeing if this diet works. So on me, it did. On me, it was great. And as part of my thesis, I also created a fiber chart because fiber is so very important, and specific types of fiber are so very important to feed the bacteria that's in our gut. And so I actually have that as one of my freebies, as a something that I give out to people on my website. So that's something that is still available and still beneficial for people to figure out, you know, when they're going through what to feed your gut. There's a fiber chart available.
That's a good bonus here to this presentation. Go grab that. I've seen it. It's very good. And I just want to acknowledge your display that you have of everything all over the floor. It looked like me when I was doing my thesis. No desk could accommodate
No.
everything that I was trying to put together. I love it.
Yes. And it's very well organized too. It's actually organized by the research, and so each of those piles is its own scientific paper. I went through probably 100 different studies to do my thesis.
I love it.
And so I learned a lot. Definitely.
That's the point of a thesis. I'm glad it was such a positive experience for you. So you mentioned that coming into nutrition studies was more of a passion project for you, and so that has me wondering, did you leave Hawthorne with a better sense of where this path would take you?
Yeah, it did, because when I started Hawthorne, I really started as kind of, I wanted to get more information. And so I didn't come in going, okay, I want a career in nutrition. I just wanted more information, and I wanted my information to carry authority. But it wasn't like, okay, I'm gonna become a clinical nutritionist. That wasn't part of the plan when I came into it. So throughout my journey at Hawthorne, I think I really came to an understanding of more of what I wanted to do with it, because of I took the clinical path because I already had a background in education. And so I thought, well, I want to educate people, but I already know how to educate people. I just need the information to be able to educate people. Mm-hmm. So I took the clinical route because I felt like it would give me more very specific clinical information to be able to educate people. And what I found was I loved working with people. I loved helping people to find answers and to, which is of course part of education, but just helping people come to realizations and to learn new things. And I learned that through the clinical practice, the practice clients basically throughout the Hawthorne journey. So that really helped me to kind of guide where I wanted to go with building a business. And because I always had that educational component, the first thing I did was start a podcast because a lot of the extra information that I got throughout my journey was also through podcasts. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, well, that's a great way to kind of get information out there. So I started a podcast. This is the cover image of my podcast. It's still available. I haven't recorded anything in a couple of years because of stuff we'll talk about in a minute. But but there are 51 episodes. So there's a lot of listening to be done. And there's a lot of really good information on there. So
I think it's a demonstration of taking the content of what you're learning in a particular course at a time and turning it into material so that you're deepening your own understanding of the content and sharing it with others to help them right away, rather than waiting till you think you know everything at the end of the program or further. Is doing it right away. So good for you.
Yeah,
they're great podcasts too.
It's fun to meet people and to kind of hear what their journey is, because I feel like, even talking about it with my journey, I feel like the journey is, the parts of the journey, it's the journey itself. There's no arrival point. The point is the journey itself. And so the podcast allowed me to also explore that with other people and hearing their stories and figuring out kind of what crumbs, that was the whole thing about organic crumbs, is what crumbs people are getting along the way. So yeah, I started the podcast, and then I worked with word of mouth clients. So people who I knew or who had heard of me from someone else. I didn't do a lot of advertising because I wasn't really ready to take on the kind of time that it would take to be full-time practitioner. I also set up wholesale accounts for supplements, which I absolutely recommend. My master's degree was actually all I needed in terms of the certification to be able to get the wholesale accounts. So I was able to set up accounts with Emerson Ecologics, which I use all the time, which is a fantastic, fantastic thing.
For those that don't know, they're a distributor company, so they're going to carry a number of, hundreds of different lines. Instead of going individually to specific companies, you go to, one-stop shop.
Right. And I had set up with Pure Encapsulations and Metagenics before I found Emerson Ecologics, but Emerson carries both Metagenics, Pure Encapsulations, and many, many, many more. So so I do have wholesale accounts with them. And then Nutrigold is another one, which I was very impressed with their company. And I did a little bit of research on the supplements and how they source them and things like that. So I've been really impressed with that company as well. So, so again, I recommend as soon as you can to set up those wholesale accounts. It's very, very helpful. So then I built my websites. So I actually have 3 websites: organiccrumbs.com, organiccrumbswellness.com, which is the business, which I don't really use as much, but it's still there. And then tamichu.com, which is the one that I'm, well, not currently, but in my little third path here, I use most frequently. And then because I graduated right before the business class was offered, like literally right before the business class was offered, I ended up doing a lot of my own research on business and how to have a business and how to grow a business. And so I took, Facebook advertising classes, I took Instagram classes, and then I took very specific online, how to have an online business classes. And then one of the bigger things that I did really right after I graduated was, again, overachiever here. I wanted to look into getting my naturopathic doctorate degree, because it felt like that was the next logical step. And that was the next path that I was, supposed to be on. So we took a family trip up to Portland to see the NCNM National School of Medicine. It was the Natural Medicine Center for Natural Medicine. Anyway, fantastic school, beautiful campus. We got to go into all the classrooms. They talked about all the class. Oh, it was so fantastic. It really felt like coming home. It was amazing. And Portland's amazing. And it was so great. But as I was going through the tour, one of the things they talked about is the amount of time that it was going to take to go through and get all of those classes done. And this was not an online program that I could take. And I ended up making the decision to not move forward with that because of the ages of my kids, and because I recognized that the 4 years that it would take me to get my naturopathic doctorate,
at least.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, especially with 4 kids, right? That it would take too much away from them at that time. So I had to.
Family first.
Yes. Yeah. Family first. So I had to come back and just get a new dream almost,
Reassess that a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Well, I'm being mindful of time here a little bit, Tami, so I want to just progress this. I'm wondering, we all face challenges in any direction that we're taking ourselves in life. So what were some of the challenges that you faced along the way?
It's a great question. My first challenge, I think, for all of it was that I have a little bit of perfection paralysis, especially after I graduated. And perfection paralysis is basically, it has to be perfect or I don't want to put it out there. And so when I was I developed classes and I developed some interesting things to teach online. A lot of that didn't get done all the way because I wanted it to be perfect. I needed it to have all of the information I needed, you know, and it just became like, it held me back. So my little thing there is done is better than perfect. It's something to kind of just keep repeating over and over and over again. You know, keep it simple, and done is better than perfect. And then one of my other really big challenges is that I am a deadline person, which means that I have to have a deadline to get things done. And I didn't know that about myself until I started taking classes at Hawthorne and realizing that, oh, I can get this stuff done and I can get this research done as long as I have a deadline, as long as someone else is requiring that information from me. And so it was really hard when you're working for yourself with that kind of personality. I won't say it's a defect, it's just a personality trait. But with that kind of thing in your personality, to work for yourself, it's very hard to kind of set my own deadlines. It's too arbitrary. It's, you know, there's not a, it's not like set in stone if it's me requiring the deadline. So knowing yourself is a really important component to moving forward in business and in life, is to, you know, what are your limitations? What are those things that you absolutely have to have in place to be able to move forward? And so that was a big one for me, and is still a big one for me, and held me back in a lot of ways. And then the biggest challenge that I had in the last 3 years was that my husband, in June 16th, 2017, had a subarachnoid hemorrhage, which is a brain bleed, basically. And the subarachnoid area is where it bled. And that's right in the middle of your brain. And it pretty much put everything on pause for a while. I actually shared a lot about it on Facebook and on Instagram, and on the podcast. There's several, I wouldn't say several, maybe four episodes about the brain bleed, about his recovery, about our time in the hospital. And the reason that we shared it is because it has a 50% fatality rate, this particular type of brain bleed. And they call it a stroke. And my husband, I believe that he survived it for a couple of reasons. One, because we have a really, really clean diet, and he had the bonus of having, you know, all those nutrients in his body to kind of protect his brain during that time. Also, with this type of bleed, most people don't make it to the hospital for 6 to 11 days. So the first sign of it is a thunderclap headache, which is, he described as the worst headache he'd ever had. And a lot of people who have had that describe it that way as well. And he woke up with it, realized something was wrong, and he was at the hospital in surgery within 5 hours of it happening. And I think that was another huge component. So, you know, so yeah, 50% fatality rate. Of the 50% who survive it, only 30% recover without lasting brain impairment. And he is doing pretty well. We were 12 days in the hospital. He had a tube in his brain for 9 of those days. And then the next 3 months after that was just really focused on recovery.
Sure.
So a lot of my business stuff kind of just went on hold. Although the process that we went through in the hospital, because, you know, the hospital food is terrible. The dietitian that came in and recommended food for him brought Ensure. Sure. And you know, when you look at the list of ingredients on the back, it's just awful. It's how is this actually helping? And then the food that they were bringing was terrible. So there was a Whole Foods that was a mile away. And so when I needed a break, I would walk to Whole Foods and just gather as many good, nutritious foods as I could and take them back. And so that's how we fed him in the hospital. And then I also had him on supplements, and all of the supplements had to be checked for contraindications to the medications that he was on. And so the nurses were like, we have no idea. You
Sure.
have to ask the doctor. So I asked the doctor, and the doctors were like, sure, whatever. So I was like, I don't know how I feel. You know, they kind of looked at it and were like, you know, it's a supplement, whatever. So I
Good
actually
thing you
did
knew
some
how to look up contraindications
yes. Oh
and,
my goodness. So,
and cross
yes.
issues with that. So
And I was also checking the medications that he was on and looking for contraindications with medications between each other, because the third leading cause of death in the United States is medical error. And so we were in the hospital for 12 days looking at all kinds of different medications, and they're giving him medication for pain and then the anti-seizure medication and just all this stuff. So every medication that came across his, you know, where he was, where they're like, we want to give you this, I was over here on the computer researching contraindications with and side effects. Like, okay, that's great. Here are the list of side effects. Is that what you want to risk? Is that worth the risk? Do we want? So there was a whole process there too. And out of that, of course, came a class. So I actually have halfway done a class on being prepared in the hospital and what to look for in the hospital and how to support loved ones while they're in the hospital.
How to be an advocate. There's, it's huge. No, it's a very important piece that's in development here. Will help so many, Tami.
Yes, so it's just a matter of getting it done. I need a deadline, doggone it.
I'll help you with that.
Right? That might be a thing we need to do. So yeah, so that happened, and then pretty much right after my husband recovered, his mother passed away. She had Parkinson's disease and passed away right during that time. And then right around that same time, one of my really, really good friends lost her husband, and he was 44, and it was sudden. It was a heart attack, and he was otherwise very healthy. And she was actually my co-chapter leader for the Weston Price Foundation. And so we knew about food, and he ate very, very, very clean. And so there were a lot of things that happened right at that time. There was a lot of trauma. There was a lot of, you know, just physical trauma with stress and grief and, you know, all about this stuff.
Sure. But always learning. There's always gifts, and there's always learning to be had in these life situations, aren't there?
Exactly. And what came out of that really, I mean, not only the hospital class, but also there's a soul care class that I have developed and have almost finished also. And then I also wrote most of an ebook about food for the brain. So, you know, out of this trauma, there's always some learning that takes place. And even on my podcast, there are a couple of episodes about grief and nutrition and how to use nutrition to, I mean, you can't really alleviate grief, but to support you during grieving and stressful times.
Wow, it's a really a big piece, Tami. But you mentioned that, you know, this led you to your fourth path. And so is this your new career now? And can you tell us more about it?
Yes. So the fourth path kind of came out of everything that I have already done. And as a nutritionist, my local edible magazine, Edible Ojai in Ventura County, the editor got my name from someone else that was in the wellness field and asked me to write an article for their summer 2018 issue. And so I talked to her on the phone, and so I did a rewilding article because that was kind of my focus in education and how to rewild children, because we kind of are domesticated humans and we need to be a little bit more rewilded. And so I did an article on it and worked great. I loved the editor. We got along so well. We kind of clicked right away. My article was really well received. It was apparently one of their most shared, downloaded articles, so they told me. So the editor asked me to write another article for the winter issue of the same year. And after she asked me, which of course I said yes, I've got another article in their winter issue, and it's about little farmers and in the area, and it's fun. But she asked me to meet with her to see how I could be more involved in the magazine. And which absolutely, I love it. The edible magazines are fantastic. They're all over the United States and Canada. You know, they're focused on sustainability and organic foods and local and seasonal. It's great. So I was like, absolutely, yes. So as I'm going to this meeting with her, I was thinking, you know, it would be super cool to have my own edible, you know, and then I'm thinking of all the local areas that we have, and we're kind of covered in this area. We've got edibles for most of our area, and I'm thinking, well, it would be so interesting to be able to do that. And so in the course of the meeting, she told me that her husband was looking to retire and that they had been looking for someone to take over the magazine for a couple years, and that she felt like I was the person. And so whoa. So I took that home to my husband, and we talked about it a lot, and things kind of worked out well in terms of finances and timing, and you know where my kids were at that point. And so we ended up purchasing the edible, and this is my Go Wild article, my little picture there.
Get dirty.
So yeah, get dirty. That's the best thing. And so we ended up purchasing the magazine in January of this year, and that's my husband right there in the middle, and he's about, I would say, 95% recovered at this point. And so I became an editor and a publisher overnight. And the other couple that's in this picture, Ron and Serene Wallace, were the owners, editor and publisher of the magazine previously, and they very, very generously gave me a 3-month training period. Where
good for you. It was good for the magazine to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. It was so generous. And so yeah.
Wow, Tami, this is really a big career change. Not so much a change, but it's a new development in it. And so, what are some of the ways your life is different now because of this? And really, do you feel like you're using your Hawthorne education in this new position with edible?
I absolutely am. It's a lot more work just because of time. We do seasonal, just like we did in nutrition. You know, you really have to focus on seasonal foods, seasonal what's happening in your life and gardening and different things like that. And we definitely do that in the magazine as well. I feel like I have a bigger platform now to be able to reach people in a way that I didn't when I was working for myself just online. And, you know, because I'm, you know, we still do sales in nutrition. We're selling our services. And so I'm still doing sales in the magazine. We're just selling ads instead of services necessarily. And then, you know, it's really still all about relationship. It's about relationship in nutrition. It's about relationship in the magazine. So you've got to know the people that you're working with, your advertisers, and you also have to build relationships with the people that you're writing about. So the chefs and the farmers and the restaurants and, you know, everybody locally who's doing really good work. We get to kind of find them and build relationships. And then my favorite thing is that deadlines are built in for me. So I have a very strong deadline. I have, you know, a time that I have to have everything done so that I can work with my designer and for the layout. And then we have a very strict timeline on when it has to go to the printer so that it can get to us. And then, so everything is kind of built in for me to have very specific deadlines. And that's very, very helpful for me to succeed.
Well,
So,
I love it that you're using your Hawthorne education and that's being reflected in the content that you're choosing for edible. Just fantastic.
yes, yeah. And, you know, it's really fun to be able to, you know, just use all of the things that I've learned at Hawthorne to choose stories and to choose, you know, just content. We're actually looking at having a wellness themed issue for our fall 2020-ish magazine. So we're going to have lots of information that I've learned and that I can pull from local people about wellness and nutrition.
Beautiful. I love it. I'm happy to have copies of this and see what you're doing ongoing, and I want everybody to be able to stay in touch with you and the work that you're doing. Do you have ways that we can contact you and stay in touch?
Yes, as a matter of fact, right now I'm on Instagram at edible at Ventura County. Our website is edibleventuracounty.com, and then you can still find me on Instagram and Facebook under Tami Chu and Organic Crumbs Wellness, and tamichu.com is my where you'll find all the classes that you can't buy yet, but you will be able to, and the things that I have going on the wellness side of things, which are kind of on pause until I can, you know, have a little bit of extra time after getting all the publishing stuff down.
Love it. Well, if we have time, there's a couple questions of some eager, active students on the line, and is listening to you and where you are in your program. She's like, I can't wait to get to where you've gotten. But looking at a question about when you were doing your thesis, and and she's asking, do you feel like paper was better than a PDF? Meaning like since you printed out the research into piles on the floor instead of organizing that content into PDFs.
Yes, I actually I feel like it helped me to organize it better. And one of the things that helped me, because it was very flexible, right? Printing it out, you can take it with you anywhere. Mm-hmm. So I would go to the park with the kids and I would be reading my research instead of being on my phone. I would actually have a piece of paper that I can write on, that I can, you know, make notes on, and different things like that. So I think there's benefit to having it kind of organized on PDF. And I did have, you know, a file with all of my, I use Zotero for holding all of my research together and organizing it that way. But definitely in terms of like just reading the studies, it was so much better to have them printed out. I have a huge stack of paper to recycle afterwards, but it was really helpful in just how I got the information.
Wonderful. Well, I think that brings us to a close, but we just have, I just want to share this comment here that said, you're so powerful, Tami. Thank you for sharing. She's 27, pre-baby life, and this speaks into my opportunity to live authentic and on my own. So thank you so much.
That's so wonderful to hear. I love that.
Yeah. Good to have that feedback. So it's been a deep pleasure for me, Tami, and I expect you to continue to do good things. So I hope that you'll visit us again at Hawthorne and continue to share the good works that you're doing. Will you do that for me?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me. I love Hawthorne and I'm happy to share.
Thank you so much. It's been a beautiful share. And I just want to let you know, everybody, that our next All About Alumni will meet back here on Wednesday, November 6th. We'll be live with Katie Lambert. She's a graduate of our unique master's program in traditional nutrition. So she's got some really exciting thing that she's going to share. Hope that you'll join us for that. And until that time, I want to wish you all the best of health, and please take good care. It matters.